Batman Returns is a 1992 American superhero film directed by Tim Burton and written by Daniel Waters. Based on the DC Comics character Batman, it is the sequel to Batman 1989 and the second installment in the Batman film series. The cast includes Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, Christopher Walken, Michael Gough, Pat Hingle, and Michael Murphy. Set during Christmas in Gotham City, the film follows Batman as he confronts corrupt businessman Max Shreck and deformed crime boss Oswald Cobblepot, or the Penguin, whose bid for power threatens the city. Their schemes are further complicated by Shreck's former secretary, Selina, who seeks revenge against him as Catwoman. Welcome back to DC Movie Rewind, where we look back at every live-action DC movie. Today we are discussing Batman Returns. Following the success of Batman 1989, which became the fifth highest-grossing film of its time, a sequel was considered inevitable. Warner Bros. Pictures began discussing a follow-up by late 1989, with plans to start filming the next May. The studio wanted Robin Williams and Danny DeVito to portray the Riddler and the Penguin respectively, and invested $2 million in acquiring the Gotham City sets at Pinewood Studios in England, intending to reuse them for at least 2 sequels. The sets were placed under 24-hour surveillance, as maintaining them was more cost-effective than rebuilding. Despite Warner Bros.' pressure to secure a script and begin production, director Tim Burton was hesitant to return. He described the idea of a sequel as dumbfounded, particularly before the first film's box office could be assessed. Burton was skeptical of sequels in general, believing they were only worthwhile if they offered something new and different. Batman writer Sam Hamm's initial story treatment expanded on District Attorney Harvey Dent, played by Billy D. Williams in Batman, and charted his transformation into the supervillain Two-Face. Warner Bros., however, pushed for the Penguin as the primary antagonist, who Hamm believed the studio regarded as Batman's most recognizable foe after the Joker. Catwoman was also added because Burton and Hamm were interested in the character. Hamm's drafts followed directly from Batman, continuing Bruce Wayne's relationship with Vicky Vale and leading to their engagement. His Penguin was depicted as an avian-themed criminal who weaponized birds, while Catwoman was portrayed as more overtly sexual, clad in bondage attire, and casually murdering groups of men. The story paired Penguin and Catwoman in a plot to frame Batman for the murders of Gotham's wealthiest citizens while pursuing a hidden treasure, which ultimately drew them to Wayne Manor and uncovered the Wayne family's secret past. Hamm also introduced the Christmas time setting and included Robin, Batman's sidekick, though his idea of assault rifle-wielding Santas was discarded. In Hamm's drafts, Batman avoided killing and concentrated on protecting Gotham's homeless. Ultimately, his 2 scripts failed to reignite Burton's interest, and the director instead focused on Edward Scissorhands and co-writing The Nightmare Before Christmas. Burton was confirmed to direct the sequel in January 1991, with filming planned to begin later that year for a 1992 release. His decision was influenced by the 1989 departure of Batman producers Peter Gubber and John Peters to Columbia Pictures, as Burton had been frustrated by the level of creative control they exercised over the first film. He agreed to return only after securing greater creative authority, later admitting that Batman was the least favorite of his films. Burton brought in several longtime collaborators to replace key members of the original Batman crew, including cinematographer Stefan Sapasky, production designer Bo Welch, creative effects supervisor Stan Winston, makeup artist Vinyl, and art directors Tom Duffield and Rick Henricks. He hired Daniel Waters to replace Hamm, preferring a writer with no emotional attachment to Batman. Burton admired Waters' script for the dark comedy Heathers, which reflected the darker tone and creative direction he envisioned for the sequel. Burton reportedly clashed with Peters, demoting him to executive producer and largely excluding him from the set. Warner Bros. Served as the production company and distributor, with additional support from executive producer Gubber and Peters' Polygram Pictures. Waters began work on his first draft in mid-1990. Burton's only guidance was that the script should avoid connections to the previous Batman, aside from a brief reference to Vale as Wayne's former partner, and that Catwoman should be developed with more depth than the typical sexy vixen archetype. Waters, who disliked the 1989 film, ignored its narrative threads in comic book history, focusing instead on artistic expression. Unlike Hamm, Waters did not object to Batman killing, arguing that the character should reflect darker contemporary sensibilities and that relying on authorities to handle captured villains felt outdated. Even so, he limited Batman's lethal actions to moments that served the story. He also expressed dissatisfaction with unscripted additions, such as the scene where Batman blows up a Red Triangle gang member. Keaton had Waters remove jabs at the 1989 film's merchandising, including an opening on a merchandise store. Waters' dialogue for Batman, which he described as bitter and cynical, including lines suggesting Gotham City was unworthy of protection, was pared back because Keaton felt Batman should speak as little as possible in costume, and Burton preferred to portray the character as motivated by trauma rather than nihilism. As a result, the script focused on the villains. Burton said he initially struggled to understand the appeal of the Penguin's comic book counterpart. Batman, Catwoman, and the Joker had clear psychological profiles, but the Penguin was just this guy with a cigarette and a top hat. The initial draft portrayed him as a stereotypical DeVito character, an abrasive gangster, but Waters and Burton agreed to make him more animalistic. They decided to present the Penguin as a tragic figure, abandoned as an infant by his parents, mirroring Batman's childhood trauma of losing his own parents. Political and social satire was incorporated, influenced by 2 episodes of the 1960s television series Batman, His-Owner the Penguin and Dis-Owner the Penguin, in which the Penguin runs for mayor. Waters reimagined Hamm's Catwoman, shifting her from a fetishy, sexual, fantasy femme fatale to a working-class, disenchanted secretary, writing her as an allegory of contemporary feminism. Waters created Max Shreck, an original character named after actor Max Shreck, to replace Harvey Dent, or Two-Face. Shreck was written satirically, an evil industrialist who orchestrates the Penguin's mayoral campaign, to show that true villains do not always wear costumes. In one draft, he was depicted as the Penguin's favorite brother. With 4 central characters to develop, Waters and Burton removed Robin, a garage mechanic who aids Batman after the Penguin crashes the Batmobile, describing the character as worthless. The Red Triangle Gang, initially conceived as a trope of performance artists, was changed to circus clowns at Burton's request. Waters said his 160-page first draft was too outlandish and would have cost $400 million to produce, prompting him to adopt a more restrained approach. His 5th and final draft focused on characterization and interactions rather than plot. Burton and Waters eventually fell out over disagreements about the script, particularly Waters' refusal to make requested changes. Burton hired Wesley Strick to streamline Waters' lengthy script, condense dialogue, and lighten the tone. Warner Bros. Executives required Strick to include a master plan for the Penguin, leading to the addition of a plot involving the kidnapping of Gotham's firstborn sons and the threat of missile attacks. Strick delivered his draft in August 1991. Waters described the changes as relatively minor, but expressed confusion over the Penguin's master plan. He made a final revision to Strick's shooting script, and although Strick was on set for months and involved in agreed-upon rewrites, Waters was the sole credited screenwriter. Michael Keaton reprised his role as Bruce Wayne in Batman for $10 million, double his salary for Batman. Burton initially wanted Marlon Brando to play the Penguin, but Warner Bros. Preferred Dustin Hoffman. Christopher Lloyd and Robert De Niro were also considered, with Danny DeVito emerging as the frontrunner after Waters reimagined the character as a deformed human-bird hybrid. DeVito was initially hesitant to accept the role until persuaded by his close friend Jack Nicholson, who had portrayed the Joker in Batman. To communicate his vision, Burton showed DeVito a painting he had created of a small character sitting on a red and white striped ball. Casting Selina Kyle, or Catwoman, proved challenging. Annette Bening was initially cast in the role but had to withdraw due to a pregnancy. Other actresses considered included Ellen Barkin, Cher, Bridget Fonda, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Madonna, Julie Newmar, Lena Olin, Susan Sarandon, Raquel Welch, and Kim Basinger. The most notable contender was Sean Young, who had been cast as Vale in Batman before an injury prevented her from performing. Young reportedly visited the Warner Bros. Lot in a homemade Catwoman costume for an impromptu audition with Burton, who allegedly hid under his desk, while Keaton and producer Mark Canton briefly met with her. She also showcased her costume on Entertainment Tonight and pitched it on The Joan Rivers Show. Warner Bros. Ultimately decided that Young did not align with their vision for Catwoman. The role went to Michelle Pfeiffer, who was regarded as a proven actress and someone who worked well with Burton, although some publications suggested the role would challenge her acting range. Pfeiffer had also been considered for the role of Vale in Batman, but Keaton vetoed her casting due to their previous romantic relationship, believing her presence could interfere with attempts to reconcile with his wife. She received a $3 million salary, $2 million more than Bening, plus a share of the film's gross profits. Pfeiffer trained for several months in kickboxing with her stunt double, Kathy Long, mastering the whip and becoming skilled enough to perform many of her own stunts with it. Shreck's appearance was modeled on Vincent Price in an unspecified older film, while Walken based his performance on moguls such as Sol Hurrock and Samuel Goldwyn. Burgess Meredith, who portrayed the Penguin in the 1960s TV series, was originally scheduled to cameo as Penguin's father, Tucker Cobblepot, but became ill during filming. He was replaced by Paul Rubens, while Diane Salinger played Tucker's wife, Esther. Both had previously appeared in Burton's feature film debut, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Although Robin was removed from the final screenplay, the character's development had progressed far enough that Marlon Wayans had already been cast. Burton had specifically wanted an African-American Robin, and costumes, sets, and action figures were created. In a 1998 interview, Wayne said that he continued to receive residual checks under the 2-film contract he had signed. Early reports suggested that Nicholson had been asked to return as the Joker, but he allegedly declined to film in England due to foreign salary taxes. Nicholson, however, denied being asked, believing that Warner Bros. Did not want to replicate the generous compensation he had received for Batman. Now, let's talk about the production.
Huh?
For a second there, you really frightened me.
The movie was produced by Warner Bros. And distributed by Warner Bros. It was directed by Tim Burton once again. The movie was written by Daniel Waters. The movie was also produced by Denise DeNovi. Principal photography began on September 3rd, 1991. Burton wanted to film in the United States with American actors, believing that Batman, which had been shot in the United Kingdom, had suffered from a British subtext. Changes in the economics of filming in the UK also made it more cost-effective to remain in the US. This decision required abandoning the Pinewood studio sets in favor of Burton's new designs. Batman Returns was filmed almost entirely on up to 8 soundstages at Warner Bros. Studios, Burbank, California, including Stage 16, which housed the expansive Gotham Plaza set. Stage 12 at the Universal Studios lot was used for the Penguin's Arctic exhibit lair. Warner Bros. Maintained a high level of security to avoid leaking details for Batman Returns. Cast and crew wore ID badges branded with the film's working title, Dictal, a word coined by Welsh and Burton meaning dictatorial, as they were unhappy with the studio's ridiculous Gestapo measures. Some sets were kept very cold for the live Emperor, Black-Footed, and King Penguins. The birds were transported in a refrigerated airplane for filming and housed in a chilled waiting area with a swimming pool, stocked daily with 1/2 ton of ice and fresh fish. DeVito stated that, although he generally enjoyed being on set, he disliked the cold conditions and was the only cast member somewhat comfortable due to the heavy padding in his costume. The Penguin Army was created using live penguins supplemented by puppets, 40 Emperor Penguin suits worn by little people, and computer-generated imagery, also known as CGI. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, also known as PETA, protested the use of real penguins, citing concerns over moving the birds from their natural environment. While the organization later acknowledged that the penguins were not mistreated, it criticized the lack of fresh drinking water, noting they were confined to a small chlorinated pool. PETA also objected to the penguins being fitted with prop weapons and gadgets, which Warner Bros. Stated were lightweight plastic. Burton himself expressed a reluctance to use live animals, emphasizing his care and concern for their treatment. Walken described the filming process as highly collaborative, recalling that a suggestion to add a blueprint for Shreck's power plant led to a model being constructed within hours. The scene in which Catwoman places a live bird in her mouth was performed alive with no CGI, and Pfeiffer later remarked that she would not perform the stunt again, given the potential risks of injury or disease. For a sewer scene, handlers positioned above and below guided an organ grinder monkey carrying a note for the Penguin. When the monkey saw DeVito in full costume and makeup, it lunged at him. A scene depicting the explosion of Shreck's superstore resulted in minor injuries to 4 stuntmen. Principal photography concluded on February 20th, 1992, after 170 days. Batman Returns' production design and visual style were reimagined by Bo Welsh, replacing the late Anton Furst and bringing a darker, expressionalist aesthetic after collaborating with Burton on Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands. Welsh designed key props such as the Bat-Ski boat and Penguin's umbrellas, introduced a Bat missile mode for the Batmobile, and oversaw large-scale sets including Gotham Plaza and Penguin's Lair. Influenced by German Expressionism, a 1920s cinematic style characterized by harsh shadows, distorted architecture, and psychological intensity, Welsh also drew from neo-fascist architecture, including Nazi Germany-era styles, American precisionist painting, and street-level imagery of homelessness and mid-affluence. He employed miniatures and exaggerated verticality to evoke a decaying, alienating Gotham. Welsh, a trained architect, structured the city on a grid of strong vertical lines, emphasizing huge skyscrapers that transformed streets into dark canyons to evoke a sense of victimization and oppression. He researched the look by studying fascist architecture from the Third Reich at World's Fairs, styles he felt were evocative of oppressive bureaucracies and dictatorships, to design the monolithic Gotham Plaza. Welsh further drew upon precisionism, a movement known for using hard outlines, solid shadows, and slick and personal surfaces to lend industrial subjects an epic character, citing the work of Charles Sheeler and Georgia O'Keeffe as specific influences. He also incorporated Burton's early sketch of Catwoman with a very S&M kind of look by integrating steel and chain elements into the set, creating the impression of a city collapsing in on itself. Costume designers Bob Ringwood and Mary Vaught updated the Batsuit with a mechanical look and crafted a fragile latex Catwoman suit requiring numerous backups. DeVito's Penguin relied on extensive prosthetics by Stan Winston's studio, including black saliva for a grotesque effect, and the team built 30 animatronic penguins supplemented with actors and digital effects. Post-production was intense, with some effect shots conceived just weeks before the June 19, 1992 release. The visual effects workload ultimately encompassed around 115 shots, employing matte paintings, miniatures, CGI, makeup, puppets, and pyrotechnics. handled by 6 major effects houses, including Stan Winston Studio, Boss Film Studios, and Matt World Digital. Chris Lebenson edited the 126-minute theatrical cut of Batman Returns. The post-production period was rushed, forcing Burton to present a cut to studio executives only 4 weeks after filming wrapped, far shorter than his typical editing timelines. The final scene of Catwoman looking up at the bat signal was filmed during post-production, just 2 weeks before release. Warner Bros. Mandated the scene, showing that Catwoman survived, after test audiences responded positively to Pfeiffer's performance. Pfeiffer was unavailable, so a stand-in was used. Although the character draws on feline mythology, such as cats having 9 lives, Waters and Burton never intended the supernatural elements to be taken literally, and Catwoman was planned to definitively die alongside Shreck. A scene showing Penguin's gang destroying a store filled with Batman merchandise was also removed. Warner Bros. Provided a final budget of $55 million for Batman Returns, though other sources have cited estimates of $50 million, $65 million, $75 million, or $80 million. Danny Elfman was initially reluctant to score Batman Returns because he was unhappy that his Batman score was supplemented with pop music by Prince. Elfman built on many of his Batman themes and said that he enjoyed working on the Penguin's themes the most because of the character's sympathetic aspects, such as his abandonment and death. Recorded with the studio orchestra on the Sony scoring stage in Los Angeles, Elfman's score included vocals, harps, bells, xylophones, flutes, pianos, and chimes. Burton and Elfman fell out during production due to the stress of finishing Batman Returns on time, but reconciled shortly afterward. The song Face to Face, played during the costume ball scene, was co-written and performed by the British rock band Suzexy and the Banshees and Elfman, that was used to promote the movie.
Maybe you should retire.
By the summer theatrical season of 1992, starting the last week of May, the film industry faced low ticket sales, rising production costs, and several box office failures from the previous year. 89 films were scheduled for release, including A League of Their Own, Alien 3, Encino Man, Far and Away, Patriot Games, and Sister Act. Studios had to carefully plan releases to avoid competition from anticipated blockbusters, such as Lethal Weapon 3, Batman Returns, and the 1992 Summer Olympics. Batman Returns was predicted to be the summer's biggest hit, causing other studios to worry about scheduling films even a few weeks from its premiere. Paramount Pictures reportedly increased Patriot Games' budget by $14 million to make it more competitive with Batman Returns and Lethal Weapon 3. Franchising had not been a major focus for Batman prior to its release, but after merchandise generated roughly $500 million of the film's $1.5 billion total earnings, it became a priority for Batman Returns. A 12-minute promotional reel debuted at Worldcon in September 1991, alongside a black and white poster of a silhouetted Batman, which was deemed mundane and uninspiring by industry professionals. Warner Bros. Delayed major promotion until February 1992 to avoid oversaturation and alienating audiences. A trailer rolled out in 5,000 theaters that month, accompanied by a new poster showing a snow-swept Batman logo. The campaign focused on the 3 central characters, Batman, Penguin, and Catwoman, which Warner Bros. Believed would offset the absence of the popular Nicholson. Over 2/3 of the 300 public posters were stolen, prompting Warner Bros. To offer 200 limited edition posters for $250, signed by Keaton, who donated his earnings to charity. Marketing expenditures were expected to exceed $100 million, including $20 million by Warner Bros. For commercials and trailers and $60 million by merchandising partners. These partners, including McDonald's, Ralston Purina, Kmart, Target Corporation, Venture Stores, and Sears, planned roughly 300 in-store Batman shops. McDonald's converted 9,000 outlets into Gotham City restaurants, featuring Batman-themed packaging and a couplet that doubled as a flying disc. CBS aired the television special The Bat, the Cat, the Penguin, Batman Returns, while Choice Hotels sponsored the hour-long The Making of Batman Returns. TV ads depicted Batman and Catwoman fighting over a can of Diet Coke, with the Penguin and his penguins promoting Choice Hotels, and additional advertisements ran on billboards and in print, sometimes across 3 consecutive newspaper pages, targeting older audiences. Batman Returns premiered on June 16, 1992, at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. 2 blocks of Hollywood Boulevard were closed for more than 3,000 fans, 33 TV film crews, and 100 photographers. A party followed on the Stage 16 Gotham Plaza set, attended by the cast and crew, as well as Arnold Schwarzenegger, Faye Dunaway, James Caan, Mickey Rooney, Harvey Keitel, Christian Slater, and James Wood, among others. The film had a limited preview release in the US and Canada on Thursday, June 18th, grossing $2 million. It expanded widely the following day, playing on an above-average 3,000 screens across 2,644 theaters. It stars Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Christopher Walken. Batman Returns grossed $45.7 million in its opening weekend, breaking the record set by Batman, which was $42.7 million, and debuted as the #1 film, topping Sister Act at $7.8 million in its fourth weekend, and Patriot Games at $7.7 million in its third. Batman Returns was the first feature film released in Dolby Stereo Digital in select theaters, marking a milestone in cinema audio technology that later became synonymous with surround sound in theaters. Early analysis suggested Batman Returns could become one of the highest-grossing films of all time. Patriot Games producer Mace Neufeld observed that other films benefited from overflow audiences who avoided long lines or sold-out screenings of Batman Returns. Batman Returns grossed $25.4 million in its second weekend, a 44.3% drop, yet remained the #1 film ahead of the debuting Unlawful Entry at $10.1 million and Sister Act at $7.2 million. By its third weekend, it became the second fastest film to reach $100 million at 11 days, behind Batman at 10 days. It held the top spot with $13.8 million, a 45.6% drop, narrowly edging out the debuts of A League of Their Own at $13.7 million and Boomerang at $13.6 million. The Washington Post described its steep week-to-week declines as concerning, and industry analysts suggested that Batman Returns would struggle to match the theatrical longevity of Batman. The film exited the top 10 highest-grossing films by the 7th week and concluded its 18-week run in late October with a total US and Canada gross of $162.8 million. This made it the third highest-grossing film of 1992, behind Home Alone 2 Lost in New York at $173.6 million and Aladdin at $217.3 million. Outside the US and Canada, Batman Returns grossed $104 million, setting UK records for the highest-grossing opening weekend at £2.5 million and single-day gross at £1.1 million. Worldwide, Batman Returns grossed $266.8 million, making it the sixth highest-grossing film of 1992, ahead of A Few Good Men at $243.2 million and behind Lethal Weapon 3 at $321.7 million. The US and Canadian box office underperformed in 1992, with admissions down by up to 5% and about 290 million tickets sold, compared to over 300 million in each of the preceding 4 years. Industry professionals attributed the decline to a combination of uninspired films, rising ticket prices, competition from the Olympics, and an economic recession. Even financially successful films experienced steep week-to-week drops, particularly among younger audiences who were vital to box office success. Despite these challenges, Batman Returns and Lethal Weapon 3 gave Warner Bros. The most profitable first half year in its history, with the studio expecting returns over $200 million. However, Batman Returns fell $114.8 million short of Batman's $411.6 million gross, and was considered a disappointment as a sequel to the fifth highest-grossing film of its time. Although it carried a PG-13 rating, warning that it may contain content unsuitable for children, Warner Bros. Received thousands of complaint letters from parents who objected to the film's violent and sexualized content. Waters anticipated some backlash, but admitted that certain elements may have gone too far. Burton later said that he preferred Batman Returns to Batman and did not view it as darker. Sam Hamm defended Burton and Waters, stating that, aside from merchandising, the film had never been intended as child-friendly. McDonald's was also criticized for its child-centered promotion and toy tie-ins. The company subsequently changed its practices, requiring extended previews of films before agreeing to promotional partnerships. Warner Bros.' hopes that the film might mirror Batman's lucrative merchandising campaign were similarly undercut, as demand for licensed products proved far weaker than in 1989. A JCPenney representative reported that only about one-third of stock had sold, with the remainder discounted, while another store described sales as barely a tenth of Batman's. It had a budget of $50 to $80 million and made $266.8 million in the box office. It currently has an 82% critic score and a 73% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, a 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb, and a 68 Metacritic score. Batman Returns drew a polarized response from critics and audiences, with its darker tone and mature content proving divisive. CinemaScore polling reported an average grade from audiences a B on an A+ to F scale. The narrative received mixed reactions. Critics generally agree that the first two acts were more compelling than the finale, which they believe struggled to resolve multiple character arcs satisfactorily. Critics noted that the film devoted more attention to its villains than to Batman himself. Walken's performance was praised for its combination of charm, wit, and understated authority. Bill Welsh's production design received acclaim for creating a sleeker, brighter, and more authoritarian Gotham than First's brooding style. Stefan Chbosky's cinematography was also well received, lending a lively quality for the subterranean sets. Despite a mixed initial reception from critics and audiences, Batman Returns has undergone a critical reappraisal in the years since its release and is now considered a classic of the superhero genre. Several publications, such as Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, now rank it among the best Batman and superhero films, with some calling it the greatest Batman movie ever made. The film is seen as underrated in a series peaking early, with subsequent films failing to live up to its vision. Burton's artistic choices, which were criticized at the time, are now seen as persistent and ahead of their time. The darker and more bleak aspects of the film have been re-evaluated in the wake of later, more serious superhero films. Burton noted the irony of the film being deemed too dark, given that later films, including the Dark Knight trilogy and The Batman, went even darker. Burton said that while Batman Returns was seen by some as bleak, for him it was a mixture of gothic, playful, kinky, and experimental tones. The Hollywood Reporter notes that the film was truer to Tim Burton's dark vision than its predecessor. Writer Daniel Waters recalled being told that Batman Returns was a great movie for people who don't like Batman. While the film received criticism for its depiction of Batman killing, Waters defended the choice, arguing that in a film like The Dark Knight, it was not practical for Batman to let the Joker live, knowing that he could escape and cause more harm. He believed that the reception of Batman Returns was improving with time, especially after the release of The Batman. For the 65th Academy Awards, Batman Returns received 2 nominations, Best Makeup for Neil, Ronnie Spector, and Winston, and Best Visual Effects for Fink, Barron, Bruno, and Skotak. The film is widely regarded as an exemplar of the superhero genre's potential for artistic expression. Variety credits the film with helping to legitimize the genre by pairing Keaton's Batman with Burton's distinct and vivid world building. The Burton Batman films are also credited with establishing the darker, more serious tone that would later define the modern superhero genre of the early 21st century. Publications like Empire and Polygon describe the film as a deeply personal and unmistakably Burton work, infused with the same gothic and satirical sensibilities as his earlier films like Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands. This approach made the film a bold, auteur-driven detour in Batman cinematic history, contrasting sharply with the camp of the 1960s and the later, more grounded style of the Dark Knight trilogy. Author Jeff Bond called Batman Returns the first auteur superhero movie because it allowed Burton to make a film that was his weird experiment rather than a strict adaptation. This willingness to ignore traditional comic book elements and sequel hooks in favor of his unique vision helped pave the way for other creative directors, such as Christopher Nolan, Peter Jackson, and Sam Raimi, to helm major franchises. Director of The Batman Matt Reeves and that film's star Robert Pattinson both called Batman Returns their favorite Batman film. Additionally, director Robert Eggers said it was visually inspired his film, Nosferatu. Pfeiffer's portrayal of Catwoman is widely regarded as a definitive big-screen interpretation of the character, praised not only for her iconic costume, but for a performance that brought a unique blend of sexuality, danger, outrageousness, and pathos to the role. Burton called it one of his favorite performances he has ever worked on. While initially hailed as the film's bright spot amid a mixed critical reception, the performance is now considered one of the greatest in the superhero genre, credited with taking a comic book character and turning her into a complex, contradictory figure that served as a commentary on the portrayal of women in genre fiction. The role is seen as a career-making one that helped audience forget previous portrayals and cemented Pfeiffer as the definitive big-screen Catwoman. Variety argued that Pfeiffer deserved an Academy Award nomination for her performance and set a benchmark for future portrayals. Burton recalled that by the time of Batman Returns, studios had begun to talk in terms of franchises and marketing, concepts that were relatively new during production of the 1989 film. The Hollywood Reporter notes that while Batman launched the modern superhero movie, Batman Returns marked a more complex stage in that evolution. With its darker tone, bold characterizations, and extensive marketing tie-ins, the film helped pave the way for the genre's later dominance, even if Burton's approach made that progression a far more uneven one. The film's tone and clash with corporate partners like McDonald's, which objected to darker content, prompted Warner Bros. To pivot to the more lighthearted and the campy style of the Joel Schumacher films. While this was an attempt to create films with more broad, family-friendly appeal, The Ringer wrote that the Schumacher films are now seen as borderline unwatchable, while Batman Returns is seen as a superior and more enduring cinematic work. In January 2017, one of the iconic batsuits worn by Keaton in the film sold at an auction for $41,250. Although a summer blockbuster upon its release, Batman Returns has become a holiday film staple due to its winter setting and Christmas iconography. Several publications have listed it among the best alternative Christmas films, noting its themes of loneliness and isolation. It is also identified as the centerpiece of Burton's unofficial Christmas trilogy, bookended by Edward Scissorhands and The Nightmare Before Christmas. About 120 products were marketed with Batman Returns, including action figures and toys by Kenner Products, Catwoman-themed clothing, toothbrushes, roller skates, t-shirts, underwear, sunglasses, towels, beanbags, mugs, weightlifting gloves, throw pillows, cookie cutters, commemorative coins, playing cards, costume jewelry, cereal, a radio-controlled Batmobile, and even tortilla chips shaped like the Batman logo. Although a similar number of products have been marketed for Batman 1989, Warner Bros. Used fewer licensees this time to allow greater oversight. To combat counterfeiting, holographic labels developed by the American Banknote Holographics were attached to licensed merchandise. The concurrent release of Batman the Animated Series later in 1992 was expected to extend merchandising success beyond the film's theatrical run. Other tie-ins included a novelization by Craig Shaw Gardner, published in July 1992, and the roller coaster Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America, built at a cost of $8 million and later replicated at additional Six Flags parks alongside a Batman stunt show. Several video game adaptations titled Batman Returns were released across nearly all available platforms. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System version was the most successful. Batman Returns would be the last film in the Warner Bros. Batman film series that featured Burton and Michael Keaton as director and leading actor. With Batman Forever, Warner Bros. Decided to go in a lighter direction to be more mainstream in the process of a family film. Burton had no interest in returning to direct a sequel, but was credited as producer. With Warner Bros. Moving on to development for Batman Forever in June 1993, a Catwoman spin-off was announced. Burton and Waters held competing visions for the project. Burton wanted to make an intimate black and white drama in homage to Cat People from 1942, while Waters' script followed Catwoman, suffering from amnesia after the events of Batman Returns, and the Las Vegas-like Oasisburg, where she confronted corrupt male superheroes. The project stalled as Burton and Pfeiffer moved on to other work. Michelle Pfeiffer was to reprise her role, with the character not to appear in Forever because of her own spin-off. Burton became attached as director, while producer Denise DeNovi and writer Daniel Waters also returned. In January 1994, Burton was unsure of his plans to direct Catwoman or an adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher. On June 6, 1995, Waters turned in his Catwoman script to Warner Bros., the same day Batman Forever was released. Burton was still being courted to direct. In an August 1995 interview, Pfeiffer reiterated her interest in the spin-off, but explained her priorities would be challenged as a mother and commitments to other projects. In January 1999, writer John August pitched his script, in which Selina Kyle leaves Gotham and goes to her hometown of Lake City. The film labored in development hell for years, with Pfeiffer replaced by Ashley Judd. In 2000, Warner Bros. Commissioned Darren Aronofsky for an adaptation of Batman Year One to reboot the original Batman film franchise. The script featured an African-American Catwoman in a prominent role. However, no further progress was made. Warner Bros. Eventually produced Catwoman in 2004, starring Halle Berry, which was widely panned. Following the reception of Batman Returns, Warner Bros. Sought to continue the series without Burton. During the early development of the canceled Catwoman spin-off, Tim Burton expressed his interest in directing the third installment of the Batman film series that began with Batman in 1989. The studio encouraged him to pursue other projects, and he realized that they did not want him to return. He was replaced with Joel Schumacher, who was seen as better suited to delivering a more family and more merchandise-friendly sequel. Keaton initially supported the change, but eventually left the role. Industry reports suggested he also sought a $15 million salary and profit share, though his producing partner Harry Colomby denied money was the issue. Mickey Dolenz was attached to star as the Riddler, the film's main antagonist. Also, Harvey Dent's transformation into Two-Face was supposed to occur in the film, with Billy D. Williams reprising his role as Dent from the first film, after turning down the offer to appear in Batman Returns. Along with these, Michelle Pfeiffer was attached to return as Catwoman, Marlon Wayans was attached to star as Robin, and Rene Russo was attached to star as Chase Meridian. When Warner Bros. Observed that the script was just as gloomy as the previous film, they decided to pit Joel Schumacher as the director of the third installment, leading to the release of Batman Forever, in which Burton served as producer, without being able to contribute ideas. Keaton later reprised his Batman in The Flash in 2023, and had also filmed scenes for the cancelled Batgirl in 2022. The character of Catwoman would appear in her own film 12 years later, in 2004. The character of the Penguin would appear again in film 30 years later, in 2022's The Batman. The character also appeared in the Gotham TV series. Batman got a new installment 3 years later in 1995, titled Batman Forever. With that being said, thanks for watching. Next time we'll be talking about Batman Forever. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more, consider giving a like or rating and subscribing with notifications so you never miss an episode. It's free. Also feel free to check out our other episodes and share this podcast with others on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time on Movie Rewind.